Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's webinar, How to Meet the RDOF Challenge of Deploying Fiber in Rural Areas, sponsored by Amphenol Broadband Solutions. Before we begin, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. On the left-hand side of your screen is the Q&A. If you have any questions during the webcast, you can type your question into the Q&A box and submit them to our speakers. All questions will be saved, so if we don't get to answer you, we may follow up via email. At the bottom of your audience console are multiple application widgets you can use. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the yellow Help widget. Here you can find answers to common questions. A copy of today's slide deck is available for download in the green Resource List widget. Towards the end of today's presentation, we'll ask you for your feedback. A survey is already open on your screen and will only take 1 minute to complete. Your feedback is extremely helpful. An on-demand version of the webcast will be available about 1 day after the event and can be accessed using the same audience link that was sent to you earlier today. I would now like to turn the event over to Light Reading's Cable and Video Practice Leader, Alan Bresnick.
All right, thank you, Beth. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Broadband World News webinar, which is entitled, How to Meet the RDOF Challenge of Deploying Fiber in Rural Areas. As Beth mentioned, my name is Alan Bresnick. I'm the Cable Video Practice Leader of Light Reading and a contributing analyst at Heavy Reading, which is the research arm of Light Reading. Based outside Toronto, I specialize in the cable, video, and broadband technology markets. I put together this webinar in tandem with our sole sponsor, Amphenol, and their partner, Mears Group, Inc. We have a very instructive program for you today, focusing on how wireline network providers can make the most of the U.S. government's Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, or RDOF program. In this session, we will look at where the RDOF program stands right now and delve into the logistics of carrying out a successful fiber network build-out in rural areas. We will examine the chief hurdles that stand in the way and recommend ways to overcome those obstacles. In particular, we will discuss the construction and manufacturing steps the network providers and their vendor partners can take to bring RDOF projects to life. Before we get started, please remember that the slides will advance automatically throughout the session. As Beth said, you can download a copy of the slides at any time by clicking on the Additional Resources button, which is located below the presentation window. As usual, we will have an audience question and answer session at the end of this webinar. You can take part in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time. Just type your question into the Ask a Question area and then click the Submit button. We will also serve up 2 audience polls today, so we'll keep things moving briskly right along here. All right, so let's take a glance at our 3 main speakers today. After I quickly set the context for today's discussion, I will turn over the digital lectern to Jim Kane. Jim is Vice President of Sales and Product Management for Amphenol Broadband Solutions. He will join us from just outside Philadelphia, PA. Our next speaker will be Minesh Patel. Minesh is Vice President of Product Management and Engineering for Amphenol. I'm having trouble reading this. Amphenol in Charles Industry. Yes. Thank you. He will join us from Schaumburg, Illinois. Our third and final presenter will be Todd Richard. Todd is Senior Vice President of Business Development for Mears Group, Inc. He will join us from Sarasota, Florida. Okay, so let's look at our agenda for today's session. As usual, we have plenty to cover. First, I'm going to give you a quick introduction to RDOF and a little bit of a market overview, and then we'll get into the presentation by the various main speakers. Jim will talk about the case for rural broadband and then the elements of successful network build, and then he'll be turning things over to Minesh to talk about the many challenges and the vendor's role. And at some point, Todd will come in to talk about moving towards success. And then we'll get into a panel discussion. We'll have our 2 audience polls, and we will tackle questions from all of you out there. So let's start by looking at the federal government's RDOF awards program. So far, after a lengthy public auction process, the FCC is doling out $9.2 billion in funding grants to 180 winning bidders, including incumbent telcos, cable operators, electric cooperatives, satellite operators, and fixed wireless providers. They're doing this to connect more than 4.2 million unserved homes and businesses throughout the country with broadband connections. That's all under phase one of the program. As you can see here from this map here, the awards are particularly concentrated in the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic and Upper Midwestern states, but every state is well represented here. Plans call for the FCC to hand out up to another $11.2 billion in grants in phase two of the program later this decade. Overall, the feds intend to award more than $20 billion in funds over a 10-year period as the program goes forward. Okay, so now let's look at this chart. Shows the top 10 award winners in the phase one RDOF auction, which concluded in late November 2020, so about almost a year and a half ago. As shown here, the list of the biggest winners features a widely diverse range of providers and companies, including large telcos like CenturyLink, Frontier, and Windstream, big cable operators like Charter Communications, ambitious fixed wireless providers like LTD Broadband, Nextlink, Resound Networks, and Starry Broadband, and equally ambitious satellite players like SpaceX, not to mention electric co-ops like the Rural Electric Cooperative Consortium. Charter alone qualified to receive $1.2 billion in government support for deployments spanning about 1.1 million locations in 24 different states. And the RDOF funds are just part of a much larger federal commitment to wire much of the country for broadband, relying heavily on fiber for much, if not most of it. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, passed by Congress last fall, for instance, allocates about $66 billion in federal funding for bringing broadband to every corner of the U.S., and most of that will be done by fiber. To get a sense of how much fiber is out there already, let's take a look at some highlights from the Fiber Broadband Association's last annual study. FBA reported that fiber now passes over 60.5 million homes in the U.S. after growing 12% last year. Some 6.9 million homes were passed by fiber for the first time in 2021, representing the second biggest FTTH growth year ever in the U.S. Some 43% of U.S. homes, and an impressive 60% of Canadian households can now access fiber-enabled services. Thanks to these kinds of massive investments, these numbers will clearly keep spiking over the rest of the decade. In fact, the latest RVA fiber investment forecast for the Fiber Broadband Association calls for U.S. service providers to spend $125 billion over the next 5 years, which is more than any fiber funding to date. And of course, federal funding is a huge factor in all that. Okay, that does it for me. So now let's turn to our first main presenter, Jim Kane from Amphenol. Welcome, Jim. Thanks for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Alan. Certainly appreciate it, and certainly appreciate light reading support in this webinar. And as Amphenol Broadband Solutions, we're very happy to be here. As you mentioned, I'm Jim Kane. I'm the VP of Sales and Product Management for ABS, and my primary responsibility is for leading Amphenol's efforts within the MSO sector with our customer base. Also, after myself, you're going to hear from Minesh Patel, who's the VP of Product Management and Engineering for Amphenol Charles. Minesh brings a wealth of expertise and focus and long-time industry knowledge around the outside plant portfolio. And then lastly but not least is Todd Richard, SVP of Business Development for Mears Group. We're definitely have the pleasure of having Todd join us as well today as one of the leading engineering and construction infrastructure firms. So with that said, I will not linger too long. So let's look at the premise first. What is RDOF about, and what are some of the pieces around it? So when we look at RDOF, the success requires that responsible equipment and construction vendors take an active role in addressing not only the need for products and technology, but perhaps more importantly, in minimizing the unique challenges encountered in rural deployments. So what's that mean? Really, it's a broad brush statement in many ways, but of course, the goal of RDOF, it's extremely positive for those that are underserved from a broadband perspective. But it also brings unique challenges and opportunities for vendors and operators. It certainly requires a strong working relationship between the RDOF providers and their vendors or integrator partners. And really, today's goal is not to really to go into the overall awards that Alan touched on, or to dive into the technologies or specific spend, but really the factors that are unique and also some of the factors that will lead to success. When you look at it as well, Minesh and Todd they'll outline some of the main areas and present both opportunities and challenges from both a vendor and service provider community. Okay. So looking at the discussion roadmap, we're going to look at the case for RDOF, really, some of the few contributing factors that validate the $20.4 billion of investment over 10 years. Number two, the elements for a successful network build. What's the mixture of major categories? Those mixtures of major categories are required for RDOF providers to achieve the goals and targets. So we'll look at some of those categories. Obviously, as I just referred to, the major challenges. There's many of them. Minesh will outline a unique set of challenges and obstacles from both the vendors and the RDOF provider perspective. And then the vendor's role. Really the vendor's role, it's the broker of collaboration, a partnership. And with that, conjunction with timelines, forecasting, production, logistics, with the service providers and the RDOF winners. And then lastly, moving towards success. Todd will review the engineering and the construction side, the supply chain, what are the associated challenges, and the potential actions. So as we move into the case for rural broadband, the graphic on the right says 60 million Americans cannot access broadband adequately today. I think the latest figures as of a few weeks ago is somewhere between 42 and 60. Seems to shift depending on deployments and depending on some of the data you acquire. But some of the factors and some of the cases for rural broadband, when you look at it, is one, housing costs are escalating rapidly in overcrowded cities. What's that mean? When you look at the accelerating costs and really what the pandemic created, it created a shift. Just to give a brief example, to not go too deep, is really a 15% swing occurred in 1 year for 18 to 34-year-olds, in which now 39% of that age group prefer a rural setting compared to a city. So we've seen a kind of a combination of the accelerating costs in conjunction with the pandemic change that mindset, and certainly have some folks in that age bracket wanting to move out of the cities more to a rural environment. Number two, agriculture output increases through advancing technology through the IoT, the Internet of Things. Some research looks at it and says about a minimum of 100 megabits per farm is required. As we're all aware, that farmer's probably not sitting at his computer. He's out in the fields, out working. So with that goes hand in hand would be a wireless network of sensors across the farm. Whether it's detecting some soil moisture, looking at the weather, or if Bessie the cow strayed too far. But actually for Bessie as well, there could be a biosensor in which it's evaluating the cow's ovulation cycles. So really, it's just a whole host of different ideas and different technologies that are going to enable through the IoT from agriculture aspect. Third, remote learning brings educational resources to roughly 20% of U.S. population that lives in rural areas. So what's that mean as well? So this access, or this RDOF and broadband access, it really addresses the teacher shortages. It can expand course offerings and supplement rural attendance. And some of those challenges are associated, distance, transportation, other factors that are incorporated. And then lastly, long commutes eliminated preserving natural resources. So RDOF will push broadband further away from the population centers, of course. And it'll just be easier for those that live beyond those traditional suburbs and in rural areas to telecommute. So, therefore preserving natural resources. Okay. So a successful RDOF build. When you look at this and on the screen, it really breaks down to 4 critical building blocks when you look at it from a broadband service provider perspective. So seasoned engineering, really a partner and partnership in specifications and that network design, which is critical. Number 2, solid technology. This network design, and it's what's being engineered, really needs to be based off of proven and reliable fiber to the home architectures for RDOF to succeed. Third piece would be competent construction. When competent construction, you want experienced firms that can address the labor and the timelines required, especially with the federal funding. And then lastly, reliable vendors. When it comes down to a reliable vendor, you of course want to partner in cost-efficient, high-quality solutions, but also you want expertise and resources to address the RDOF in this current environment, in which Minesh will talk more about the supply chain and some of the challenges, but certainly it will takes that expertise to really navigate today's day. Okay. And with that said, I will turn that over back to Alan.
All right, excellent, Jim. Thanks for getting us started there. And I have a quick correction for everybody. I said 4.2 million unserved homes. RDOF is the phase one is supposed to reach. It's actually 5.2 million. So add another million to the figure that I gave you before. Okay, so now it's time for our first audience poll question. It should be up on your screen. Question is, what do you see as the largest challenge in deploying broadband to rural areas? I'll give you 6 choices. Please select one. 6 choices are technology. Second is supply chain. Third is engineering/planning. Fourth is construction. Fifth is bureaucracy. And 6th is the ubiquitous other. Now take the On24 system a minute or so to compile all the results. So while we're waiting for that, let's keep Jim around and maybe bring in Minesh as well for a quick question. So gentlemen, what factors besides supply chain do you expect to see as the biggest challenges?
Sure, Alan. If you don't mind, I'll answer that one first, and let Minesh chime in.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
So one of the big pieces that you would look at would be a shift in the RDOF architecture during that deployment. So once you're working with an operator and designs and the architecture is decided on and production deployment begins, any slight product change or variance, it could be something as minor as the number of ports or the length of a particular cable. Just minor variances, especially in this current environment, could be a huge factor that would impact manufacturers' performance at this time.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Minesh, did you want to say a word or two about this as well?
Yeah, I think, the biggest challenge comes down to planning. And the planning starts with architecture selection. And you start off, and I'll talk about this here in a couple slides, but you start off in one direction, and in this environment, you find problems downstream. So what used to be hey, you plan the architecture and you move forward, is now an iterative process. So that's one of the biggest challenges, and those challenges also then cascade down into the supply chain.
Okay, so thank you both. So let's see what we have here as the results. I have to just push it onto the big screen here. Let's see if we can. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I went off video just because it's easier for me to read the results, but clearly I'm still here. The leading challenges, it looks like a tie between construction and bureaucracy, both at about close to 31%, and coming in third was supply chain at 22%. Okay. Is this about what you expected, gentlemen, or did you think it was going to be different from that?
It aligns with my expectations. I think we certainly see challenges across the board. We're in an environment where with every change in administration, we have different fundamentals on how we want to approach the industry. So it creates a challenge for business plans to have to pay back within a certain interval before there's another potential for the regulatory environment to change.
Okay. All right. Thanks, Minesh. And thanks for everyone out there for participating in the poll. All right. So now we're going to go back to the presentation with Minesh. So Minesh, hi again. Thanks for joining us. And let's get into the challenges. And I just went too far with your slide. There you go.
Yeah, thank you, Alan. So there are many challenges, and there's always challenges with network deployment. However, you could be successful prior to the pandemic and the current environment. You could be successful kind of selecting your architecture and planning out the technology, and then kind of engaging the rest of your organization to go procure materials, start the actual engineering and planning, and your construction staff can get the personnel in place. However, as I just said a few minutes ago, this whole process is now iterative because of the challenges that we've had. We've seen the supply chain being taxed significantly. One, because we're coming out of the pandemic, and two, we've had some events that have really identified some weaknesses in the supply chain. The storms that we had in Texas really took out the plastic supply chain. We've had geopolitical issues that have caused material costs to skyrocket, and it all starts to play a significant factor in what's available and when. The technologies that are available today are fantastic, right? We have a lot of practical options to deploying broadband services. With the push that we've had with fiber, it makes the new 5G technologies much more viable for in-home internet, fiber to the home. We're delivering multi-gig services, and then fixed wireless technology has evolved greatly. So there are many different technology options available, and as carrier market starts to plan their respective architectures, really got to look downstream today to ensure that those materials are going to be available when you need to get your network deployed, because with RDOF, there are milestones that have to be achieved. So the technologies have really stood up to the broadband demands. I think, the key here is the push for fiber, right? Once you get fiber so deep into the network, it makes all of the different last mile technologies viable, and especially in a rural environment, to have fixed wireless as a viable option is very significant, because that's going to be the most cost-effective way to get to those subscribers, and to be able to offer the type of bandwidth that enables some of the use cases that Jim mentioned earlier. That's what's going to give consumers the benefit of RDOF. Yeah, I think we talked about supply chain, business as usual versus RDOF. The key difference is just scale. Today we have so many more carriers looking to deploy big broadband networks. We have our business as usual volumes, and with RDOF and all the organic capital investments that just about every carrier is making, it has increased demand 3-4-fold in some product categories. So, here I show that we need accurate forecasts. The supply chain, quite frankly, has gotten to the point where even an accurate forecast isn't going to be good enough. You almost need committed forecast. And if you really want to ensure success, you got to get out there and place your orders far in advance to make sure that the materials that you want are going to be available. The next couple bullets really go together: material and product availability and rising material costs. We're in an inflationary environment. For most of my telecom career, I've had the good fortune of maybe one or two commodity vectors going up at a given time, but they've usually subsided after a certain period of time. Right now, every cost vector is going up. So it really becomes a tremendous challenge to manage both availability and that cost side of the equation. Availability is often there. It comes down to, as many of our suppliers have told us, what you're willing to pay for it. So, at Amphenol, we try and absorb what we can, but in reality, the cost situation is beyond absorbing it. So we try and work with our carrier customers and let them know in advance where some of the pitfalls are with their architectural approaches, so that way you can plan more effectively and come in within the cost targets that have been laid out. The logistics are also a challenge. Prior to the pandemic, it was like clockwork. You can get your product from Asia in 4 weeks. You'll receive it a week to clear customs and get to your factory here. That's not true any longer. It takes almost 3 times as long to arrive. And God forbid, if you wanted to get in the belly of an airplane, that used to be a 3 or 4 day trip, and now that's turned into 2 to 3 weeks. So about the only thing that is abundant in today's supply chain is uncertainty. So there are a great deal of challenges. I think on the engineering side, as you make decisions on how you want to approach your architecture and do your technology planning, the one thing that always jumps top of mind for me is how do we help stretch these federal dollars as far as possible? And decisions of going buried or aerial impact that. Do you want to go and capture your aerial regions first, so that way you can deploy more and hit more customers so you can hit your milestones? Or do you want to look at your buried, because with aerial, you're susceptible to storms and outages more than you are with buried? You've got decisions to make on whether you want to invest in sealed connectivity. Can you get the labor to do the splicing and the traditional construction methods, or does sealed connectivity help you get things done better, faster, with less labor that is available today? So all sorts of challenges. There are other challenges out there, but I'm going to have Todd step in here and share some of the other challenges on the engineering front.
Thank you, Minesh. Appreciate that. As we look at engineering, design engineering, architecture of fiber networks, one of the key things that Minesh had pointed out was the ability to stretch federal dollars. And so with our experience looking at a number of projects that we have in our portfolio, the number one thing to understand is that the geography of the rural networks has a very it can have a very fluid layout, and with respect to pole attachments, municipalities and power companies, either co-ops or investor-owned, may have options to attach to poles, which could be perhaps a better price to the end customer. But we also look at running construction through underground or buried applications to help mitigate time delays. And so one of the things that the options that we have available to us is with certain materials like ADSS cable, there's options to help reduce and predict better make-ready results. And so depending on the health the network has, if the plant network has very good poles and the class of poles are sufficient for the region, then the make-ready can be managed, and these options are available to the developer as we're looking at construction planning. So on the construction aspect, so it was very interesting to see the survey results come back tied with bureaucracy. And so your construction partner is really the folks that help bring all these things together. So from a supply chain partner, Amphenol has a fantastic global reach, and that has significant impacts on production. And so production for us is, how much fiber we can build in a network over time, and with the crew, the crew status that we have right now, we can predict these outcomes pretty easily as long as the supply chain is in check. And so I see one of the notes here, getting labor force in markets where we're going to be, it's going to be really difficult. And so in rural environments, what we've actually been able to deliver to the field is a regional, what I'll call regional clustered approach. And so say in the southeast states where we have presence in, say, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, reaching over to Georgia, we have regional offices that help us bring in skill sets and talent that we need. So that one of the challenges we do have is the experience with craft. And so fiber technicians, both installation, folks that are actually journeymen that can work in the power space, it's really key to attract that type of craft. And those resources are, in a number of ways, it's our biggest challenge from actually recruiting those folks. But once we have them on the team, what we've been doing primarily that's been helpful in a region where we're producing really good results with the team on site, we will hire from local communities, and we will also train the customers' technical staff as required. And so what we've done in many cases is if we develop some good technical craft personnel in an area, those technicians are offered to stay with the, say it's a power co-op in a small region, they're actually offered to stay with the power co-op and stay on from a maintenance experience. And so that helps to shore up the customer. And what we're challenged with then as we go to mobilize in other areas around those regions, we'll have to backfill for those resources. I'd say on a limited workforce, there are a significant amount of openings, and we are very focused on the training. So I'll get to the training in one aspect here in a minute, but the availability to bring in people for us on a national level is pretty strong. And so we're luckily part of a very large parent company, and there's almost 50,000 employees. And so there is the option to bring in skill sets and talent from other regions. I do want to focus on the training. So the training for us is extremely important. And we train for a number of different applications, both aerial placement of fiber, underground construction. We've also done some cross-training from power line journey linemen that are actually cross-training to fiber technicians, both hanging the fiber on the pole and also splicing. Splicing is a key aspect. We have just recently made some significant investments in resources, tools to help mobilize these splicing teams across the country. The cable and conduit placement training is also very important, and we work with our suppliers and our partners to help ensure we're training on the most highly technical, advanced equipment available. And so what we see is a lot of partnerships with folks who produce the cable and the conduit and other types of materials, so we can teach the current standards of the application. Copper twisted pair is a bit less aggressive these days, but the central office, so the inside plant technicians, we also have training facilities for them. And again, those folks, the customers that have resources that are already in their company, if they can receive additional training, it's very beneficial for that customer, and it's beneficial for us because those resources have experience, basically knowledge of the network internal to that company. And then the last thing is wireless engineering. We have brought on significant amount of wireless support, and so what we're able to do is train for fiber basically to the tower, to the pole, to the antenna, and then we can apply that training towards the wireless engineering as well. I think wireless engineering is a very, very important part of our future in rural America, where we can bring fiber to every farm on the land. However, within, as we talked about earlier, within those regions that are widespread, we want to see how far that wireless technology can expand beyond the agricultural areas. So I do want to bring up kind of as a summary view, the engineering aspect where we can make decisions of applying fiber either to the pole or actually the underground aspects, but with pole attachments and make ready, again, the certainty of the application really begs towards the discussion about planning. And Minesh talked about planning. So materials readiness, the timing to the site, the yards that we set up, all of these factors play into the planning with the customer to ensure that we can predict the assurance of the network availability. one of the things that I did want to talk about is the products that are not available. So in any material, bill of materials plan, there's a number of resources and vendors, and Minesh, you can kick in here in a minute. So what I wanted to talk about is when there's shortages or supply chain concerns, there is a way for us to actually address other options. And so sourcing those options, Minesh, I think, as you talked about it, if plastics are in short demand in one area, could you offer some of those suggested alternatives that could help us shore up that supply chain?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the different materials, the different products, there's many different ways to make a point of presence in the telecom network. We work with customers all the time to try and find capacity using whatever processes, whatever capabilities that we can scrounge up. Every day, it's a matter of how tenacious you can be to solve the given problems. The supply chain is taxing. The recent events really highlighted some other things, other challenges that are coming up. Who would have thought that stainless steel hardware is going to be a problem? Well, apparently 15 to 20% of the world's nickel comes out of Russia. So obviously that has caused a hiccup. So we're constantly scrambling to identify alternative solutions to overcome the supply chain challenges. And then in the solutions that we work with delivering to customers, we're always looking at alternative ways to shorten that lead time to the product that a given job was engineered to.
That's helpful. And one of the key aspects of this, the reason Minesh was offering those options within the construction environment, things can go wrong, whether, delays in permitting, right-of-way placement, those approvals, sometimes get delayed. And so what we need to really be able to do is be flexible, both with supply chain expectations and implementation. So production can have, a significant impact on the time of the project, the cost of the project. So what we really want to do is have those options available to us ahead of time. And with regard to, experience, I think we've made a really good dent in the resources that we do train and bring up to speed are retained within our company, and we want to hold on to those valuable resources and then perhaps move them around where we can to help, other areas where we might be short. The one thing that talks through, there's a discussion here about kitting, having those materials and supply chains in an available manner where those kits can be available to us from a construction aspect is really helpful. So I think it's really important for the vendors that support supply chain, as well as the vendors that support the construction, are working together hand in hand to ensure, predictable schedules. And then, one of the ways we can help is, and Minesh mentioned it earlier, is we have considered large volumes of supply chain allocation for our pre-buys on cable. We're looking at years ahead now as far as cable allocation and trying to secure product and supply chain certainty around the pre-purchasing of those kind of aspects. So we're really interested in working with Amphenol and the partners to adopt a go-to-market strategy that really allows us to be certain towards schedule and especially the budget. And so those two things go also hand in hand. We wanted to assure that the challenges we see here in some of these slides can be, if not avoided, can actually be addressed and mitigated. And I need some water. That's my slides. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Todd. That was really interesting. Thank you, Minesh, for chiming in there as well. I particularly found the wireless engineering part interesting. I'd like to hear more about that at a future point. But let's move on to our second audience poll question. It should be up on your screens now. The question is, knowing that proper training of new staff is key to successful RDOF deployments, what sort of training is your organization doing to prepare? And once again, we give you 6 choices. Please select one. First choice is aerial line placement. Second choice is underground construction. Third is fiber optic cable splicing. Fourth is cable and conduit placement. Fifth is residential and multi-unit insulation. And sixth is, once again, other. Once again, it'll take the On24 system a minute or so to compile the results. So while waiting for them, let's go to Todd on this one. Todd, can you fill us in a little bit more about construction training and what's going on with that right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. So from a facilities aspect, we actually own and operate Northwest Lyman College in LaGrange, Texas. Mm-hmm. My voice is fading, but we have 4 sites around the country, and happy to provide follow-up with the audience here at a later date. But I got to get some water.
Sure, I totally understand. I run into that problem a lot too. So okay, so let's take a look at our poll results here. Let me expand this so I can see it a little bit better. I'm going to go off camera so I can read it a little easier. And it looks like the lead result here was at the very bottom at 31% was other. Okay, well, we'll go away from other. The lead of the choices was fiber optic cable splicing at 23%. And then it's pretty well spread out. About 15% said residential multi-unit insulation. And the same amount said cable and conduit placement. So really the results are pretty spread around here. There's no one thing that stands out. Todd, is this what you expected to see, or any surprises?
The splicing was very, very predictable. I think that's a very important aspect of fiber deployment. I'd be really interested in the other, what concepts might those be, and it may be geared maybe towards inside plant applications. So I'd be open to the audience to kind of explain what they're looking for.
Okay, all right. It looks like we'll have to go back to this another time to find out more about that. So very interesting. Thank you all for participating in both our polls. Thanks to Todd and Minesh for doing this last presentation, and we hope that Todd can get his voice back. So we'll give him a little chance to rest and have some water. Okay, so now it's time for our formal panel discussion. And we'll try to integrate audience questions in with this as well. But let's start with the first question here that's up on your screen. What are a few of the key construction practices that can help launch a successful Fiber to the X project? Todd, are you okay with this, or should we skip over this and come back to you later?
No, I think I'm good. I've got my voice back. I think it's allergies and lots of pollen in the air. So key construction practices would be, one of the primary things that we talk about in our planning is permitting. So permitting from a civil engineering and applications process in the right-of-way and the easements is very critical to the planning early stage in any development. So I think that's one of the abilities that we have, is to work with the customer to ensure that either on their side or we can bring in resources, but it helps to predict better the design for constructability when the permitting is in process and available for predictable results, meaning what's the timelines to results.
Okay, thanks, Todd. Minesh and Jim, did either one of you want to chime in on that one? I'll take that as a no. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. What are some ways to streamline production of OSP construction in the field? Todd, we have you on the hot seat again here.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, primarily the supply chain and materials allocation and the timing of delivery to the field is really critical. So that streamline can allow us to plan for segments to be built and also be really flexible. And the kitting and inventory management from the partners is really helpful as well. It just allows us, again, more certainty on what's ready to go to the field, and when can those segments be delivered and accepted.
Okay. All right. Thanks. Does anybody else want to chime in on that? No? Well, we're going to, okay, go ahead, Jim, Minesh.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Alan. Certainly, I guess as far as outside plan, to add on to Todd's comments, when you look at it that way as well, one of the important factors in streamlining production and really addressing the RDOF concerns is adequate forecasting, right? As Minesh alluded to, get your orders in now and get them in often, is that just to plan and pre-plan, especially when we take a step back and look at the timelines for RDOF deployment, 40% within the first 3 years, 20% thereafter, and 100% within the 6 years. Seems like a long time, but it's not in the scheme of things. It's a very tight time frame, especially with the conditions of today.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Third question here. What are some key resources that the construction team can contribute to the overall effort?
Yeah, my experience is working with the incumbent customer. The construction superintendent is a key resource. They can often act as the executive sponsor for the program. And these superintendents work hand in hand with the materials management teams, both with the vendors that are providing supply chain and logistics support. And that again works hand in hand with delivery to the field. And, just basically focus on project management and, reporting with the customer, daily, weekly, monthly. That's really important.
Okay. Thanks, Todd. Next question. What are some important areas to focus on for construction documentation?
So in my experience, managing expectations up front are the best way for success. So if supply chain logistics, material planning goes hand in hand with construction production rates and predictable schedule, I think having that expectation defined during that planning session in a detailed statement of work is extremely important. So that document will keep everybody tied to the focus points, and then those changes that need to be addressed during the program can be addressed outside of the statement of work. But I think that's really important. Set everybody's expectations up front and then plan for success.
Okay, thanks, Todd. Jim or Minesh, did either one of you want to add anything to that? Okay, I'll take that as enough. Okay, next question, I moved on to a new slide for this, is in this difficult supply chain environment, how can network providers help equipment manufacturers? Who wants to take a stab at that one?
So let me tackle that one, and
sure, Minesh,
this response would probably cover all three of the remaining panel questions or discussion points.
Okay.
The biggest challenge really is labor, and one of the ways that equipment or network providers can help is to take a look at the logistics and how they utilize our available labor. As manufacturers, we want to allocate our labor to create the most output possible. However, one of the challenges is because we're trying to get materials out to so many different job sites, we're kind of being turned into a distributor as well. So small order quantities going to many different places. So rather than having a few more people working on the assembly lines, we're having to allocate that precious labor, that limited labor, onto shipping and receiving activities that also have grown exponentially with the demand. So it's how do you utilize the labor that's available to you? And I think on the construction side, it's really the same challenge that Todd talked about. You want to plan and optimize the available personnel you have. So okay. I think that's a universal challenge today.
Okay. Thanks, Minesh. Jim, did you want to add anything to that?
Well, I believe Minesh certainly hit it on the head as far as the labor challenges and the fluctuations of production up or down. And I know I've probably commented once or twice on it, but honestly, forecasting was always a dirty word for many years. But now certainly it's hit a critical point, and working hand in hand with our service providers and customers, it's become a focal point, and it's really turning the tide in trying to have ourselves as a vendor and network supplier get ahead of the curve. And
Right.
certainly the one thing that could impact it primarily would be just extreme expansion or contraction of that forecast in a short period of time, as I think everyone on this panel can allude to. But just wanted to add that one comment on the Minesh's point.
Sure. Todd, did you want to have the last word on this?
Yeah, I think what was covered is relevant, and we are seeing changes in time, but we're also seeing additional funds coming down the pipe. So I think being able to work with the incumbent customers and the supply chain partners and hand in hand with construction delivery, I think we've got fantastic future ahead of us.
Okay, thank you all. I'm going to turn to one of the audience questions here. I'm not sure any of us can answer this, but I'll throw it out there. When do you expect additional funds to be released for RDOF builds? Anybody have a sense of when the feds are going to go to phase 2?
This is Todd. So, I think there's a high degree of assurance that the mapping needs to be completed before maybe some of these other funds are released. But I from what I've seen and spoken with folks that in the know, it's the FCC's maps that have been in that process of a refinement, and it looks like third, fourth quarter this year, perhaps maybe into next year, when those maps might be starting to come around again.
Okay. So how much of the funding has actually been released so far? Do you have a sense of that? Of the $9.2 billion?
I don't have the exact numbers, Alan.
Sure, I was trying to find that, and I couldn't find it anywhere online. So maybe even the FCC doesn't even know yet how much is out there. Okay. I think we covered all the questions here, but I want to see if anybody else wanted to add anything about the biggest challenges in manufacturing today, and what they're seeing right now with manufacturing fiber for and related products for RDOF build-outs.
From the manufacturing side, everybody is trying to work on expanding capacity.
Right.
And as much as everybody wants to expand capacity, the equipment that you need to increase output isn't available quick. We're doing a lot to expand our operations, and lead times for equipment is astronomical. And everyone is working to try and pull that in, but expanding output is challenged. So we focus where we can, the things that you control, trying to get more labor to better utilize the equipment that you have today. But I haven't found any part of the economy that isn't constrained right now.
Right. How long is the lead time now? How long are the supply chain delays right now?
It depends on the commodities, but let's just stick with capital equipment. I mean, most capital equipment is 36 to 40 weeks before you take delivery of the equipment, and then you got to get it positioned and turned up.
Okay, so 36 to 40 weeks, so we're talking about like 9 to 10 months?
Yes.
Okay. Is that getting better or worse? Is it?
It seems to be getting longer.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, the challenges are out there.
Okay. Todd, are you seeing that as well?
Yeah, and to Minesh's point, we see things getting longer because with the additional funds in the funnel, and private equity money coming in, other promises of federal funding, it's unfortunately it might get a little worse before it gets better until everything catches up. And that time horizon's anybody's guess. But the important thing is for us to plan diligently for those to the scale, to Minesh's point, and get those orders in with predictable accuracy, and then things are better.
Okay. Jim, did you want to add anything to that?
I guess one final point on top of Todd and Minesh's comments. Certainly, when you look at RDOF today and the demand, it's 5x what it was a few months ago. But also, there's some other service providers that are doing large-scale build-outs at the same time that are outside of RDOF. So the demand on raw fiber and products across the board is unprecedented. We haven't seen it in a long time in this industry. So when you put the freight and material challenges in conjunction with the factory labor, it certainly has its challenges, but I'm going to flip this around and put a smile on it. Provides a lot of opportunity as well. So for Todd and Minesh and myself, it's high demand,
right.
But at the same time, we're doing what we can to certainly help out all our service providers and our partners and customers.
Okay. All right. Thank you all. All right. We have time for a couple more questions. But before I ask anything else, I just want to point out that we should have an evaluation form on your screens. Please complete the form to give us some feedback about the session. To complete the form, please press the submit button, submit answer button at the bottom of the page. Thanks. Okay, so while you're doing that, I'll go ahead with a couple more questions. We don't have a lot more time. But I'm curious to the panel, given the supply chain problems, given some of the other constraints, when we do this webinar, say in March 2023, what do you think will be different? What will be different a year from now? I didn't prepare you for this question, so I apologize in advance, but I know you can all answer it. So, Jim, you want to start us off on that? What will be different a year from now?
Aside from me getting a bit older and a bit grayer.
No, but you'll still have your hair. That's what counts.
It's getting shorter and it's falling out. That's okay. No, Alan, I would believe, this time next year, as Minesh alluded to as well, we're seeing conditions deteriorate in some ways, but on the flip side, based on all the demand, we're ramping up capacity, ramping up expansion, brick and mortar facilities, adding on tooling. So I think we'll be better prepared to handle the demand. The state of the world and the raw materials, I think at that point, it could be anyone's guess what 2023 will bring. But right. I know from an Amphenol perspective, we'll continue to build and ramp for this long-term production.
Okay, fair enough. Minesh, what will be different a year from now, if anything?
What will be different is we will have some of our investments putting out product. So okay. We should be able to start to catch up with the demand that we have visibility to. The thing that keeps me up at night is what demand do we not know about yet? And okay. What are we going to have to do to react to it? And that's why my comments earlier, planning, forecasting, getting your orders in, we need that visibility, because without that visibility, what we may have expanded to meet may not be adequate.
Right. Okay. Well, I hope you don't have too many sleepless nights over it. Todd, you get the final word on this.
Yeah, as Jim said, we'll be much better prepared in a year from now, where our regional focus allows us then to be more mobile within that region. And so now we've got more than east-west. We've got a number of smaller sub-regions that allows us to get to meet customer demands a lot more quickly and with less cost. So predictability on that, I think, will be key.
Okay. Well, thank you all, gentlemen. Well, I'm afraid we've run out of time. I want to thank you all out there for attending, and with special thanks to our three main speakers today, Jim Kane and Minesh Patel from Amphenol and Todd Richard from Mears Group. Let's give them some awesome thumbs up out there. This webinar will be archived on the actually on the Broadband World News website for the next year, starting early next week. Within the next 24 to 48 hours, you should receive a personalized follow-up email with links, details, and a link to today's presentation on demand. So feel free to review the webinar whenever you'd like over the next 12 months. This webinar is copyright 2022 by Light Reading. The presentation materials are owned or copyrighted by Light Reading, Amphenol, and Mears Group. These three companies and their speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. On behalf of all of us here, thanks for tuning in today. Be well, stay safe, get boosted, and take care, everybody. We'll see you soon.
Thank you, Alan.